In Driving the Green Book, award-winning broadcaster Alvin Hall takes us on a journey through America's haunted racial past with the legendary Green Book as our guide. Hi, it's Brenda with HEC Books, where we discuss books with the authors who write them. If you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe for more great content like this. Now, let's meet Alvin Hall to talk about the personal journey that he took to discover the Negro Motorist Green Book. Alvin Hall, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us, what is the Green Book?
The Green Book, whose official name is the Negro Motorist Green Book, was created in 1936 by Victor Hugo Green and his wife Alma, who at the time lived in Harlem. Victor was a postman in New Jersey, Hackensack to be specific. During the summer, he and his wife would take trips to go to Richmond, Virginia to visit Alma's relatives. And on their way there, they would encounter aggravations. They could not use bathrooms. They could not buy food. They could not stop at a place to sleep. Victor became frustrated about this and decided to create a publication to help people find the services they wanted when they were traveling. At first, he went among his friends, gathered information, and so the first Green Book really focused on primarily New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and a little of New England. The next one expanded upon that, and then by 1938, people started to hear about the Green Book, and it gradually started to spread across America. It was published every April or May at the beginning of the summer holiday season so that people could use it when they were on the road.
This was such an integral part of Black life, especially traveling, and yet so many people don't even know that it ever existed, including a lot of Black Americans. How did you find it?
I found out about the Green Book when I was on an airplane, not even in a car. When I fly around, I typically like to buy magazines, so I buy a stack and I'll go through them and read them and leave them on the plane. And in this case, I saw a little sidebar that mentioned the Negro Motorist Green Book. This was in about 2015. I thought, what is this? I've never heard of this publication. So I said to myself, when I get back to New York, I would go to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and I would see what it was about. I came back and I discovered that the Schomburg has the largest collection of green books in the United States. I think they have all of the editions except one. And at the same time, I met this wonderful librarian there named Myra Liriano, and she spread them out on the desk in front of me. So in those days, you could actually touch them. That's now no longer possible. But the New York Public Library has digitized all of them now, so they're available online. So like everybody, Brenda, if you were doing this, where would you look if you saw the Green Book the first time?
I would look where I'm living, I suppose, right?
Exactly.
Or like where I have connections to, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I looked at the city nearest to where I was born, Tallahassee, Florida. And I was born south of Tallahassee in the country. And we would go to Tallahassee to buy groceries, go to the doctor. And much to my surprise, there was a single listing for the Abner, Virginia Motel on Railroad Avenue. We drove up and down Railroad Avenue all the time when we went to town, and I never saw it. So my first journey with the Green Book had to start at that place, and that opened up this journey that became the book.
This was like finding hidden treasure.
It really was, because the Abner, Virginia was located in this part of the city. It was shielded, it had live oak trees with moss hanging over it, a little pond across the way. And you could imagine how Count Basie's band or James Brown and his touring company or the Motown Revue had pulled up to this, and this would be a safe harbor for them, the way it was sequestered, the way it was seemingly safe and quiet from the troubles of the world.
One of the reasons a lot of African Americans didn't know about it was because sometimes you didn't really travel for good reasons.
Exactly.
And it was expensive, and it was an era where it wasn't a possibility for loads of families, right?
I think my family is typical. We were raised poor, but I always say we were raised po because we couldn't afford the O-R in the word. And so we didn't travel. We didn't go on vacations. When we did travel, it was to visit my Uncle Louis in Lake City, Florida, or maybe to go to Jacksonville to visit a relative. Those were overnight trips. So we didn't need a green book for that. Uncle's son would come by in his panel truck or his car, and we would all crowd in the car. We'd always start at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and he would drive off down the road, and he'd be humming some spiritual as he looked in the rearview mirror. And the way they sat in the front seat was Uncle's son, my grandmother, and my mother, and then we would be on the bench seat in the back of the car. That's the way it was. So we didn't have any money for travel, and the only time we traveled was for relatives, when somebody was sick, for a funeral, or maybe for some church celebration.
So the Green Book is named for its founder, Victor Green. How did he take it from that idea to building really like a publishing company in a way, right?
It did become a publishing company. Victor worked as a postman in Hackensack, New Jersey. At the time, there were 2 postmen's unions, one for white postmen and one for black postmen. Victor was able to tap into people that he knew in both of those unions, and they would tell him about places in cities where they delivered mail that would be appropriate for his travel guide. And that's how he began to source the listings in the travel guide. In the early days, he and Alma would visit the places in order to see what the quality was if they provided services that were appropriate for his publication. Later on, as the Green Book grew and started to cover America, Victor couldn't travel all those places because he was a postman in Hackensack. So he had agents around the country that would gather information for him. Now, the other part of that was distributing the travel guide. Remember, this is still during Jim Crow and segregation in America. So there were newsstands in black communities who could order it in bulk. You could subscribe to it and it would be mailed to you. Pullman porters who worked on trains all around the country who may come to New York City, they would then take it and share it with other Pullman porters who would distribute it around America. And then at one point, marketing stepped in the form of a man who worked for Exxon, then called Esso.
That was the big
big service station owned by Standard Oil. And Esso stations became the first stations to actually carry the Green Book. Not all Esso stations, but those that wanted to and those that were black-owned actually carried it so you could pick it up while you were on the road. There was a man named Billboard Jackson, and he was the marketing person who actually worked for Exxon as a liaison with the Green Book. And so he was the one who helped with that expansion. And there's another little known fact here. Who owned Standard Oil? The Rockefellers. The Rockefellers had been noted abolitionists. Spelman College in Atlanta is named after a Rockefeller. So it seems logical now that the Rockefellers would be much more open to this type of distribution, and they proved this because it was the first oil company in America that allowed black people to actually own the franchises.
It must have been so cool to just peel away the layers as you took this journey.
Brenda, what you say is so true. It's not just peeling back the story of the Green Book. It's, when I'm out talking to people about it, gathering the personal stories, hearing their memories of that time, families who recall using the Green Book. One of my favorite stories was told to me by Hezekiah Jackson in Birmingham, Alabama. He would say he would be at home and his mother would be all at church and somebody would come and knock on the door and said, can we borrow that Green Book? And he said, well, when Mama comes back home, and they kept it in a part of the house, and people would come over where they were taking trips to visit relatives in New York or Detroit, and they would want that Green Book because, as he said about his family, when we travel, my granddaddy had the Green Book and he had his pocket Bible.
It was that important.
It was that important.
Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it. Stay tuned for the second part of this interview, where Alvin Hall takes us on the road with the Green Book.